Awesome. Okay, we are live. Let's get started here. Let me share my screen. Thanks everybody for coming today. We've got an awesome presentation. There we go. Sent. Okay, awesome. Can I get some head nods that this is loaded up and good to go? I see some thumbs up. Awesome. Okay, cool. Welcome everybody to the UWSP Student Chapter of the Wildlife Society's General Member Meeting every Tuesday at 5. Happy you're here. So projects are getting going. There's a lot of volunteer opportunities. If you guys want to get out on those, handle some animals, there are some dues you have to pay to help support our chapter and keep those projects running with equipment and budgets and things like that. So if you want to pay the dues online, you can do that through our PayPal at uwsp.tws, $5, or you can drop off cash at my office hour from 11 to noon. And if you're doing the PayPal option, make sure you use friends and family, and then you guys won't get charged that extra fee. Is Melinda here?
I am.
Okay.
All right. So along with dues, we have a couple other things that we need if you want to go out on projects. So we have just a general membership form. I can put the link in the chat in just a bit. And then dues, like Nate said, and then also a hold harmless form. I sent these out at the beginning of the semester. If you need it, shoot me an email and I can send you the file. And you can just fill it out either virtually with Adobe or whatever your preferred method is, or you can just print it out and then fill it out and scan it and send it back. Either way, works for me. And if you're not getting emails from us, you totally should be, because they're great. There's lots of job announcements and volunteer opportunities and all that fun stuff. So the best way to join our email list is to just join us on Spin, and you'll get added automatically.
Awesome. Thank you, Melinda. Lizzie.
All right, our conservation topic this week is about the heavy burden of lead. So I'm sure most of you guys know or have heard that like lead poisoning is a big problem still with bald eagles, because they eat a lot of carrion and just roadkill. And if they ingest lead from carcasses, it affects them really badly. But from what I know, there hasn't been a ton of studies on golden eagles just because they aren't as much of scavengers. They tend to like kill their own stuff more often. But this study came out that like actually did study golden eagles, and the results are pretty interesting. So it turns out that non-migratory golden eagles suffer a lot more from lead poisoning than do the migratory golden eagles. So for those of you who don't know about lead exposure, it can have both lethal and sublethal effects. Sublethal effects include kidney failure, motor skill reduction, which prevents them from being able to capture prey, liver and digestive issues, and reproduction problems. And of course, death. That's the lethal effect. And this is caused by when hunters shoot an animal. If they're using lead ammunition, the lead ammo like shatters within the body, and then all those little lead fragments get everywhere. So if they leave a gut pile, or like if they don't collect the animal, then there's this animal that just has a bunch of lead fragments in it. And of course, our scavengers come and eat that lead. And actually, this picture on the bottom shows the difference between, it shows a lead bullet right here with, after it like hits something, those are all the little fragments that are then inside of that animal. So with that being said, they tested golden eagle's blood to see the lead amount within it, and they found that migratory eagles, the ones that went somewhere else over the winter, they had 60% of those eagles had higher lead levels. The non-migratory eagles had a staggering 94.5% of eagles having too much lead in their bodies, which is, it's only like a little more than a 30% difference, but that's a lot of eagles that are having lead problems. And the reason for this, they figure, is because the non-migratory eagles, since they're not moving, they have to rely more on that roadkill and scavenging in order to make it through the winter. So the solution to this is actually really simple. It's always been simple, just like switching from lead shot. And like, I'm sure many of you guys are hunters, and I just encourage you, if you are using lead right now, the best thing you can do for these birds is to not. And I guess if you aren't using lead currently, then spread the word, like spread the word on how this affects our awesome eagles. So with that, we can move on to our next question, or to our quiz bowl. So there's this record nest. Well, the record recorded nest for golden eagles. So can you guys guess what the largest like height and then width of it was? And hint, it's bigger than you think. It's kind of amazing.
Answers rolling in. Give you guys 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and then the polling, and there's the results.
All right, you guys got the height correct. This nest was 20 feet tall, which is like insane. And then it was 8.5 feet wide. So this little picture I have here, that isn't like the exact nest. That's smaller, of course, but you kind of like get the gist of like it just turns into like this funnel like shape. And bald eagles actually do the same thing if they're at a nest long enough. So I don't know, just massive nests, really cool.
Awesome.
All right, our mystery species this week is this photo. So if you guys know what it is, type it into the chat and see if you guys can get it right. Ooh, you guys are close, on the right track.
Good guesses, good guesses.
Oh, Sophia got it. It is the Philippine eagle. Oh, all right. Yeah, you guys were close with harpy. They look similar, but different parts of the world there. So Philippine eagles are just freaking awesome birds. Yeah, I'm sure most of you guys have probably heard of a harpy eagle. But these guys are similar, and they're just as cool, honestly. They're the largest extant eagle in terms of their length and their wing surface. In terms of weight, I think it's a toss-up between harpy and I'm not sure what the other one is, but harpy is like one of the heavier ones. But they are the national bird of the Philippines. That was official as of 1995. And as the name goes, they are native only to the Philippine Islands. And on those islands, they are on they're on 4 of them, and there's like thousands of islands there. So they're one of the rarest birds in the world, less than 500 individuals. And the reason for the decline in their population has been deforestation, shooting, just kind of the usual stuff that causes species to decline, which is unfortunate because they're really cool birds. But this is the cool part. They eat bats, civets, flying squirrels, and monkeys. They don't actually eat people, but I just thought that was funny. But yeah, they eat monkeys. They're like kind of known as the monkey eating eagle. And when they're paired up, they actually like use pair hunting, where one eagle goes to distract the prey, and the other one swoops in from behind and just grabs it. So pretty awesome.
Awesome. Thank you, Lizzie. Super cool stuff.
And last thing for me, we still have buttons for sale. I'm sure everyone's just flooding into Nate's office hour to grab them. $1 each, or get this, 3 for $3. So we've got the Hingstrom buttons pictured here, which we made just this year. And then we do still have a few Sartini and Dubé buttons available. So if you're interested, head to Nate's office hour, which you can see is 11 to noon on Mondays in TNR 359A.
Awesome. Brylan.
So if you have a project that you're in charge of and you have some travel money that you're not going to be using and you need some money for equipment or other maintenance, we can do a line item change and make that money available to you. So if you want this to happen, you can email me with the amount that you'd like to transfer and I'll move the money. And requests for this semester are due on Monday, March 15th at midnight. So if you have any other questions about that, just shoot me an email.
Awesome. Thank you, Brylan.
And then the Adopt a Wildlife Area project will be going out on the first workday of the spring semester on Saturday, March 13th. And we'll be meeting at Lot E, which is west of TNR, at 8:30, and we'll all travel to the Buena Vista Wildlife Area, where we'll be cutting brush and applying herbicide to invasive species on the grassland. You do not need to have any experience. This is a great opportunity to get hands-on experience with habitat manipulation and the various techniques that we use to improve habitat for different species. It's encouraged to, if you have the ability to drive yourself because of some various COVID restrictions, and we'll be following all the COVID restrictions that have been placed on the university, including masks and whatnot. And I'll be sending out a sign-up sheet at the end of the meeting, so you can sign up that way. Yep.
Awesome. Super cool opportunity, guys. Get on that. Thank you, Brylan and AWA.
Hey everyone, so you may have thought conferences were done for the school year, but wait, there's one more, and that's the Wildlife Damage Management Conference, which is actually hosted by our very own Wisconsin Center for Wildlife. Abstracts have been extended to March 12th, and registration is now open, which is $30 for a student. This will take place virtually from April 19th to April 22nd. This conference is going to have a large range of current human-wildlife conflicts. And originally, this conference was supposed to take place in Wisconsin, but since with COVID, it's going virtual. And they will actually be doing a virtual tour to talk about like significant human-wildlife conflicts in Wisconsin. So that includes Canada geese, sandhill cranes, black bears, a ton of other different animals too. And then there will also be a live social to network with professionals, so that will be pretty cool. And then I sent out sponsorship applications last week, and those will be due this Sunday by 11:59 p.m. Everyone is encouraged to apply. You don't have to be presenting to attend. And you can also email completed applications and questions to me. I think I saw Dr. Hingstrom here, so if he has anything to add to that too, he knows a lot about this because he's on the board.
Awesome. Thank you, Mackenzie. Yeah, this is an awesome opportunity, guys. We have a lot of funds left over to be able to sponsor you guys. So there's such a good chance. So don't be stopped from applying that, oh, I'm not going to get accepted. I'm a freshman. I'm this, I'm that. No, apply. It's so easy to get registered for free and get sponsored by us. So never been easier to go to conferences either. So it's never a good time, or never a bad time to start. Awesome. Thank you, Mackenzie.
Okay, guys. I'm going to highlight the member of the week that won last week, and that would be Tommy. Now, I don't know if you can tell by all the stuff I got going on in this slide, but he's a big fan of a bunch of nerdy stuff. Lord of the Rings, The Witcher. I shouldn't say nerdy. I love all that stuff too. So, but we're gonna put some facts down for you guys. Tommy is really Arthur, and he comes from a long line of Arthurs. Is that right? How long is that line, if I can ask?
I'm number 5.
Number 5. That's a lot of Arthurs.
Royalty.
Back to King Arthur. Geez. Man, I guess I really don't have anything else. Nate, if you want to click that button once. Uh-oh, it's Chungus. Oh, Tommy. I hear you like using the phrase Chungus. Maybe something like chowder, chachi. I want to hear why. Why do you like to use those words? Let's hear it.
Everybody needs a catchphrase. If you don't have one, just get in contact with me and I can give you one.
All right. Well, I guess you got to follow Tommy on Instagram. He's going to hook you up with that catchphrase. You can just DM him. He'll probably follow you right back. I'm going to throw it out in the chat too. Hey, if you guys want to get member of the week, you want to get spotlighted just like this, make sure you guess what the animal is, and I will see you later.
Thank you, Nathan. Maddie and Gray Squirrel Project, are you guys out there?
I am. All right.
Awesome.
So we are doing our last weekend of trapping, I think, this weekend. I think there's a few spots if anyone wants to come out and volunteer. We go out at 9, noon, and 3, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's a really great opportunity to get some animal handling experience and data collection experience. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to send me an email, and I hope to see you out there.
Awesome. Thank you, Maddie and Gray Squirrel Project. Super cool, guys. Lots of opportunities. Got to get on them. Rough Grouse Project.
Yes, so we're looking for co-leaders for the Rough Grouse Project. We go up to Tree Haven every weekend following spring break. So we capture male rough grouse that are drumming on their log using box traps, and then we collar them and track them around the property. We present our research at pretty much every conference. So there's a lot of wide range of experiences that you guys can get from this opportunity. I guess our big thing is that you don't need to have experience with any of this to be involved in the project. The most important thing is that you have a good attitude, you're willing to learn. So freshmen, sophomores, the more years you have on the project, the more you can do with the project. So everybody should apply if they have any interest. Lots of great opportunities. Applications are due to one of the other co-leaders on the project, Brady Roberts, by this Friday at 5 p.m. So just email Brady or I if you have any questions, and we look forward to seeing some of your applications.
Awesome. Thank you, Logan and Rough Grouse Project. Melina.
Hey everyone, CNR Bible study is tomorrow. It happens virtually over Zoom, and the link is there on the slide. We're going through a bunch of videos done by the Bible Project. So usually we'll watch the video and then we'll discuss like what we thought of it, or like ask each other questions if we didn't like understand something. And it's for all like natural resource majors. So you get to know fellow natural resource majors. And then if you have any questions, you can contact me or Megan, and our emails are there on the slide.
Awesome. Thank you, Melina. Shelby.
Hello, everyone. So every Friday, we feature a wildlife photo taken by one of our members on our Instagram and our Facebook page for Fauna Friday. So if you've taken any cool wildlife photos recently or in the past, you can send them in by DMing our Instagram page at UWSP_TWS, or you can email me, and my email's up there on the slide. And then you can follow our student chapter on many social media platforms. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, even add us on Snapchat with the code up on the slide. And then our meetings are also recorded. So if you ever miss one, you can find those recordings on both our website and our YouTube channel.
Awesome. Thank you, Shelby. So that does it for announcements this week, guys. Next week, we're going to be having Shannon McNamara, who is a TWS alum from UWSP, and she is a WDNR wolf biologist, and she does a lot of cool track surveys. And she's going to be talking to us and updating us on the status of wolves in Wisconsin and all that's going on with them. So it should be a super cool talk. But without further ado, this week we have Travis Livieri here, who's the executive director for Prairie Wildlife Research out there in the Central Plains there. So Travis, I will stop my share. Thanks for being here. The rest of the time is yours.
You bet. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, and I will get my screen share going. And can you see my screen?
Looks good.
Okay, we'll put it on slideshow and see if that works. Maybe. Okay, can you see my slideshow?
There, it's loaded. Yep, looks good.
Okay. So we're going to talk about black-footed ferrets and talk about some recent things that have been in the news about black-footed ferrets, which are exciting, and some challenges that we have ahead of us. So to give you a little bit of background as to who I am a cheesehead. I was born and raised in Milwaukee. We have a cabin up on a lake in Park Falls, Wisconsin. That was the real genesis of my desire to work with wildlife. I knew right off the bat I wanted to go to college to work with wildlife, so I went to Stevens Point. I got my bachelor's in wildlife and biology. After that, I went to South Dakota to start working with black-footed ferrets. I worked for 3 different federal agencies: the USGS, the National Park Service, and the U.S. Forest Service, all with black-footed ferrets, all in South Dakota. My bosses there were very encouraging for me to go back to grad school. So I came back to Point for my master's degree, which I did on black-footed ferret home ranges and territories. As I was finishing up my master's degree, I was starting to figure out that there wasn't going to be a job waiting for me at the end of the rainbow. And there was no promise of one either. So if I wanted to keep working with black-footed ferrets, I had to think outside the box. And so I went and started a nonprofit organization called Prairie Wildlife Research. And we go out and get grants and contracts and donations to work in the field with black-footed ferrets and prairie dogs and all of their associated issues for conservation of the species. So we're a nonprofit organization, but we are field biologists. We're not into litigation or things like that or activism. Back in 2014, I decided then to go back to school again and started my PhD at Colorado State University in Fort Collins. And I am in the death throes of trying to finish up that dissertation. Scott Engstrom even poked me about it because he's a co-author on one of the chapters just before this started. So that gives you an idea of who I am and the background. And if you can believe it, that person on the picture on the left is the same person on the right. That's what a lot of years of nocturnal field work will do to you. So this is the critter we're going to talk about, black-footed ferrets. I assume that most of you have taken mammalogy at some point in time or will. So you'll learn more about the taxonomy and phylogeography of black-footed ferrets, but this is a weasel. It's in the weasel family. Is one of 3 ferret species in this planet. So the domestic ferrets that you see, those are actually descended from European ferrets. So when your roommate says, "Oh yeah, my cousin's got one of those black-footed ferrets," it may be a ferret, it may have black feet, but it's not actually a black-footed ferret. It's actually a European ferret domesticated. So this is the only one native to North America, and they are obligate carnivores of prairie dogs. So we cannot talk about black-footed ferrets without talking about prairie dogs. So prairie dogs, there are 3 different species in the U.S., or actually 4 different species in the U.S., 3 of them that occur with prairie dogs and with black-footed ferrets. And then there's 1 in Mexico. So there's 5 overall species of prairie dogs. The most common one you're going to see out there is the black-tailed prairie dog. So if you come to western South Dakota and come to Badlands National Park, or go up to Devil's Tower in Wyoming, those are black-tailed prairie dogs. Prairie dogs are herbivores, so they eat grass. They are social colonial animals. So you see them together in these large colonies. They live together as family units. They have a whole fascinating behavior and ecology to this species. They're also a keystone species that provides habitat for many other species, including black-footed ferrets. They're also one of the most controversial species in North America. I actually put them in the same category as as wolves and grizzly bears in terms of the controversy that they can really evoke amongst the public. There are people that absolutely hate prairie dogs and think they should be eradicated from the face of the earth. And on the other end of the spectrum, there are those that are the prairie dog huggers that think that they are everything and that we should be doing everything we can to save them. And these are the kinds of people you're gonna have to work with in your career. And I want you guys to think about that. Working with wildlife is really working with people a lot of times. And you're gonna find that that's a truism. So why are black-footed ferrets endangered? It's pretty easy. Everything that happened to prairie dogs is what sucked black-footed ferrets down to the vortex of extinction. So conversion of native prairie to cropland. If you ever drive across western Kansas, Kansas used to be one gigantic mixed grass prairie that harbored thousands and thousands and thousands of acres of prairie dogs and black-footed ferrets. And now when you drive across Kansas and you fly across Kansas, it's mostly been converted to cropland. There is very little native prairie left, not only in Kansas, but in the Great Plains. And we're losing more and more every year. Poisoning of prairie dogs was a big threat. And these were campaigns that were sponsored by the US government or state agencies to eradicate prairie dogs, sometimes on public lands, and that still happens on public lands. And so poisoning of prairie dogs was also another impact that not only created fragmentation of prairie dog colonies across the Great Plains, but then pulled ferrets down with them. The popular activity out west is prairie dog shooting. That's another threat to prairie dogs that again has that effect on black-footed ferrets. But biologically, our biggest threat is plague. And when I say plague, I mean Black Death, the disease that killed a third of the human population back in the 1300s. It is a deadly disease for both prairie dogs and for black-footed ferrets. So it's a double whammy. It kills the prey and it kills ferrets directly. So you guys have probably seen some variation of this, maybe in conservation biology, or hopefully you will at some point in time, but you have the different threats of land conversion and poisoning and shooting and plague. That led to about a 98% reduction of prairie dogs throughout the entire Great Plains. You get these small fragmented populations of black-footed ferrets then, which then leads you into small population biology. Fewer individuals to breed with, so you get inbreeding, loss of genetic diversity. That leads to reduced adaptability to survive and reproduce. You get sometimes deleterious alleles when you get inbreeding going on, so you get less fitness. And that's really what the name of the game is about, fitness. So you reduce population sizes, reduced N. And as you get smaller and smaller, you keep sliding down the drain. And the further you get down the drain, the harder it is to jump back out. So this gives you an idea of what the range of black-footed ferrets is in North America. So we've got that gray area is the combined range of black-tailed prairie dogs, white-tailed prairie dogs, and Gunnison's prairie dogs. And it overlaps, it's sympatric with black-footed ferrets. So again, those threats of land conversion, poisoning, plague, all converge to push ferrets all the way down to one spot. So in 1981, we only had one population of black-footed ferrets left on the planet. I should have left the range map up here to show you that Meeteetse is right on look in Wyoming, they're kind of up towards Yellowstone. So it's on the very edge of the range, and that's where the last population of black-footed ferrets came from. So every single black-footed ferret alive today comes from 18 individuals that we captured out of Meeteetse in 1987. So we pulled them out of the wild. They became extinct in the wild and brought them into zoos for captive breeding. And we had produced enough kits, that's what young black-footed ferrets are called, by 1991 to start putting them back out into the wild in a reintroduction. Just from a little bit of a evolutionary standpoint, I want you guys to think about They all came from one population on the very edge of the range. And we know genetically that they probably aren't representative of what was out there across that whole entire Great Plains population. So these are the zoos that breed black-footed ferrets. We've got in Colorado, in the middle, Cheyenne Mountain Zoo in Colorado Springs. That dot in northern Colorado, the star, is the National Black-footed Ferret Conservation Center run by the Fish and Wildlife Service. In Arizona, we have the Phoenix Zoo. Over in Kentucky, we have Louisville Zoo, Toronto Zoo up in Canada, and then the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute in Virginia, which is part of the Smithsonian complex. Those are the places that breed black-footed ferrets in captivity and then provide them to folks like me to take them out into the wild for reintroduction. So we started reintroducing ferrets in 1991. We continue to do it today. Some sites do well and take off. Some sites need multiple reinforcements over the years. We're looking for large areas of prairie dogs. And when I say large, so my family also has 40 acres of land over in Richland Center that we go deer hunting on. It's where my parents live now. That's a nice piece of land, 40 acres. If you come out west and you plot out 40 acres, you can see the stakes, and it's actually a pretty small piece of land. So 40 acres of prairie dogs is not very much. 400 acres of prairie dogs, yeah. 4,000 acres, okay, now we're getting somewhere. 40,000 acres of prairie dogs, aha. Now we're talking about the landscape scale size that prairie dogs used to perform their ecological function. That's what large self-sustaining populations of black-footed ferrets really need. And so we're looking for lots of prairie dogs in a big area and different sites. And so these are the different places we've put black-footed ferrets out over the past 25 years, from Canada all the way down to Mexico, from Utah all the way over into Kansas. And the site I work on mostly is in South Dakota in the Badlands National Park area. After we put black-footed ferrets out, we try to monitor the populations. They're nocturnal, so I do a lot of nighttime work with a big spotlight, trying to capture them up and put microchips in them. We also try to manage disease through killing fleas and prairie dog burrows. That's what the bottom right picture is a guy spritzing insecticide dust down into a burrow. A big part of the black-footed ferret program is finding new sites and finding funding for those sites. Part of the non-glamorous side of wildlife biology is, again, working with people, working with budgets, and trying to really secure those permissions and the legal and policy mechanisms needed to be able to put black-footed ferrets out into an area and to maintain that prairie dog habitat. Another big initiative for the program is maintaining that genetic diversity and ensuring animal health. I told you that every single black-footed ferret alive today comes from those last 18. And actually, of those last 18, they were all from one population, and we know that they were all highly related to begin with. Some of them were actually mother, daughter, brother, sister. And so we really have genetically probably 7 individuals that all black-footed ferrets are descended from. So that's a big deal for genetic diversity. We haven't seen that manifest itself in any real negative ways yet, but the longer we go, the worse it's going to get. And remember, black-footed ferrets were extinct in the wild. We can't just go out and trap from a different population and bring in new genetics. There are no new genetics. So what do? You guys have probably seen some of the news about the first cloned black-footed ferret, born in December. Her name is Elizabeth Ann. Believe me, we've heard all of the jokes and seen all of the memes, but if you've got some new ones, I'd love to see them. A lot of folks, folks have responded to this quite well. We were afraid that there was going to be quite a bit of pushback in a negative way, but a lot of folks, especially once you understood the story, really responded positively to the idea of cloning black-footed ferrets. And so how does this clone, this Elizabeth Ann, how does she add genetic diversity back to black-footed ferrets? So this clone is from a dead animal, Willa, that died in 1988. Willa was one of the original 18 black-footed ferrets that was taken from a tsetse in the 80s. She did not reproduce. She has no descendants. So she has no direct genetic representation in the current black-footed ferret population. She's related to them somehow, but she's not directly related. So think about if you had an Aunt Phyllis who never had kids and she died 30 years ago, and then you decided your parents decided to preserve some of your Aunt Phyllis's tissues and cells in a frozen zoo. And that's what you then used to recreate Aunt Phyllis. So she's not necessarily that different from you, but she brings in a little bit of genetic diversity that you might not have. So that's what Elizabeth Ann is. So how do you clone a black-footed ferret? This is a pretty simplistic representation of it. And on paper, it really is a really interesting process. So you use domestic ferrets as part of this process because they're so closely related, and you can actually intermix domestic ferrets, Siberian ferrets, and black-footed ferrets. They can breed and hybridize. So we know that they're that closely related that they can have some reproductive similarities. So you use a neutered domestic male ferret to try to breed a domestic female ferret. He's neutered, so he's unsuccessful, but that female ferret then releases unfertilized eggs. They then went in and harvested those unfertilized eggs from that domestic ferret. They then took some of those frozen somatic cells from Willa from 30 years ago that was sitting in the San Diego Zoo. They made a bunch of them, and then they inserted those into basically that empty egg and then implanted it back into the domestic ferret. So the domestic ferret then gave birth to Elizabeth Ann, the cloned Willa black-footed ferret. And so that now is a complete clone of Willa, with the exception of the mitochondrial DNA. Because where do you get your mitochondrial DNA? Every single one of you. From your mom. So what we need to do now is get Elizabeth Ann to reproduce in captivity, have a son, cross him to a pure black-footed ferret, and then we have no more domestic ferret mitochondrial DNA. Wow. While all of this sounds really cool, it's also a big cautionary tale that I hope none of you ever have to do this in your career. While this is exciting news and it's new, we shouldn't have to do this to conserve species. I hope none of you ever have to do that. So moving on to disease. Disease is one of the big issues for black-footed ferrets. I mentioned they're susceptible to plague. They're also susceptible to canine distemper. And they might be susceptible to SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19 coronavirus, whatever you want to call it. I'm sure you've heard about mink susceptibility to COVID-19. And we know that mink and ferrets are close related. So, oh boy, how do we manage disease in black-footed ferrets? Now that adds a third one possibly to our list that we have to manage for black-footed ferrets. Well, I'm sure as you take Dr. DeBay's disease class, you're going to learn that there's different ways to manage disease. You can go after the pathogen itself. So the picture on the top right there would be a picture of me vaccinating a black-footed ferret against, we have vaccines for distemper and for plague. So when I go out and handle them in the fall every year, we give them vaccine shots. You can go after the vector that's transmitting the disease. In this case, it's fleas. So we spritz that insecticide dust down into the burrows. You can also try to manage the environment. And that's another way to try to manage disease. So there's a kind of a triangle of things to manage with wildlife disease. And you can tackle those different pieces of the triangles in different ways. So as far as SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus, we had to figure out how are we going to work with black-footed ferrets. We don't even know if they're really susceptible, but chances are they are. Well, our strategy was really to manage the people. And as you guys, I mean, we've been living disease management for a year now with coronavirus. And so some of this should seem a little bit familiar. So we need to manage the hosts. We need to enhance our PPE protocol. We need to disinfect our equipment daily. This is, again, stuff that we're already doing as humans, but we need to take it to a different level in thinking about how to work in the field with black-footed ferrets. So managing the people. So a lot of times, and a lot of Stevens Point, these are actually pictures of Stevens Point students that had come out to visit in the fall for a conservation biology class for a field trip. And we would all go out in the field and go work with black-footed ferrets. Well, that's it. We're not going to do any of that probably for a while at least. Essential crew only, no other passengers or observers. I want you guys to think about how we're dealing with COVID-19 in black-footed ferrets and how you go about your field work and thinking about disease, not just COVID-19, but other diseases and how to minimize those risks. We minimized our travel. So we stayed in the field longer. We took trips to town very, very seldom. We would use grocery pickup. We would go to the gas station after hours, so there was nobody else there. We would really try to isolate ourselves. We did that in our field camp as well. So we lived in camper trailers, literally 2 miles away from the next human being. So I completely isolated ourselves so that we would minimize any chance of outside people bringing COVID in. Our communication, even within our crew, then had to change. You know, when you work out in the field, a lot of times you like to gather around the tailgate of the pickup truck and talk about your assignments for the day or how things went or whatnot. Well, that needed to change. So no more tailgate sessions around the pickup truck. We communicated by phone, by text, by two-way radio. We used apps on our phones to use maps. We would then also do daily thermometer checks before we hit the field to make sure that nobody was running a fever, and then report that back. And then whenever we were not in the field, we got our PCR tests for COVID-19 very regularly. And we try to do that every time that I came home to Colorado, I would go and get a COVID test. As far as some of our enhanced PPE, we usually wore masks anyways when we were handling blackfoot ferrets up close, but now it was anywhere within 15 feet of a black-footed ferret, you're going to wear masks. You would sanitize your hands before you leave the vehicle. And then we limited it down, again, the crew size, so that only a few people were out there actually working with black-footed ferrets. This product, called Rescue Accelerated Hydrogen Peroxide, is one of the best products for killing coronavirus on surfaces. And so it's a veterinary product. It's actually very readily available and easy to get. Again, we use this accelerated hydrogen peroxide. One of the things we had to think about was our black-footed ferret traps and how we handled those. So what you see in the back of my pickup there are black-footed ferret traps wrapped in canvas, and that wooden divider separates the clean ones from the dirty ones. The dirty ones were used that night, set for a black-footed ferret. Whether it caught one or not, they stayed in the dirty stack then and were not reused. And then each morning, I would unwrap those traps and sanitize them with that accelerated hydrogen peroxide. So we tried to go the next step up with our disease management for black-footed ferrets. Success? Well, I'll leave that up to other folks, but we had no crew members come down that were known to be infected. We observed our black-footed ferrets over multiple months, meaning that we saw individuals in August that we saw then later on in November. So at least from August to November, we did not cause any mortality from COVID that we can document. In our area in South Dakota, we handled 196 black-footed ferrets. and documented a total of 210. That's the largest wild population in the world right now. That bottom graph shows you what COVID was doing in South Dakota at that time that we were working. So the green area is the time of our field work, and the blue curve there was what COVID was doing. So COVID was increasing throughout our field season, and I think we were successful in mitigating that threat. So I want you guys to think about, as you go forward with your projects and point, as you go get some internships and jobs this summer, if you're working with mustelids or felids or canids or even bats, even though actually most of our bats in North America aren't known to be susceptible, consider some of these things. Consider, first of all, just suspending the fieldwork completely to involve, to not have any direct contact or exposure with that wildlife species. We considered that with black-footed ferrets, and we thought that we could mitigate the risk. And that's why we went forward with it. But we considered that option of not doing any field work at all in 2020. Think about enhanced PPE protocols. Look at what you're doing currently in your animal handling, and maybe get some outside eyes on it and see what could you do a little bit differently to take it to that next level that maintains safety for you, for the animals, and minimizes that risk of disease transmission. Think about how you might design or modify the tools and different equipment that you use out in the field and the different situations that you might be in the field to minimize that risk. I know that we're hopefully, I think that we should get tested on a regular basis if you're working with wildlife, and absolutely, positively report any suspicious mortalities to the CDC or the state veterinarians. I don't think that we are done with SARS-CoV-2. We know it is mutating, and we know it's probably going to continue to mutate. Whether that becomes more virulent, we don't really know. But it has the possibility of going into a wildlife species from human and then coming back out as something else, just like it did from going from a bat to, we think, a pangolin in the wet market in Wuhan to a human. That could happen very easily again, and we don't fully understand which species really are susceptible to COVID-19. So I would just encourage everybody to really take these things into consideration. Okay, and that's what I've got for you guys this afternoon, but I definitely want to talk and take some questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Travis. That was awesome. Super cool to see that cloning. That was something I really wanted to get some info on. Thank you so much. Yeah, guys, as always, if you want to unmute, ask questions, go ahead, type them in, whatever you guys see fit. But shoot them away.
Hello.
Howdy.
So I have a question for you regarding the cloning and everything. Do you think this will be viable for other endangered species and even recently extinct creatures?
Yeah, another one that just hit the news and didn't make nowhere near the splash just before black-footed ferrets was Przewalski's horse. Did you guys hear that one? Przewalski's is spelled with a P, so don't look it up with a Z or a, yeah. It looks like Przewalski's. It's a Przewalski's is how you say that.
Chernobyl.
So they had just cloned a Przewalski's horse as well. A little bit of a similar situation in terms of genetic diversity and whatnot, but a little bit better situated to probably increase genetic diversity. I think this will be probably a model for other programs. Again, I really hope that other programs don't ever have to use this, because what it really represents is, I don't want to call it a failure, but it is. It's a failure of our wildlife management over the past 50, 100 years, that we allowed black-footed ferrets to get all the way down to one tiny little spot in Wyoming. That's really what it comes down to. And I'm not saying that it was right or wrong, but now we're dealing with the consequences of that. So what I would say to you guys is do everything you can to make sure that your species you work with never gets down to 18 animals, because then you're going to be in this bucket trying to jump back out, and trying to jump back out of this bucket is really hard. So yeah, I see this as being unfortunately, probably a model for future cloning other species.
Cool. Great question. Travis, are you able to read chats?
I can't see the chat. I'm sorry.
Okay,
my
yeah,
screens
here.
get all screwed up.
No problem. Here, so we have a question from Amber Smith, and she asked, will a research paper be coming out shortly covering everything that regarded the cloning?
I think so. Yep. I think they've got a couple publications in press right now. I can send you guys the paper that figure with the oocytes and blastocysts and whatever else was in. And that kind of set that was kind of the white paper on how to do it. I'll send it to you guys. It's a pretty interesting paper. But yeah, keep an eye out there will be some publications coming on this soon. I wasn't directly involved in any of it, but I've been on committees kind of evaluating it and that kind of thing.
Awesome. Any other questions? Otherwise, I've got a quick one for you. So I know that a huge issue that you guys run into is farmers not wanting the prairie dog holes in their pastures because their cows are breaking ankles, legs, things like that. Is there any like mitigation efforts being done to work with farmers where those kind of can coexist, or is there really just a huge disconnect with cows and those prairie dog holes?
Well, similar to bats being blind and wolves eating children, yes, cows break legs in prairie dog holes. It happens all the time. You can ask Dr. Hengstrom. He's talked to a lot of ranchers over the years, as I have as well. And that is one of the most persistent myths in wildlife management.
Oh, thank God it's a myth.
so it really does not occur. It really is. I mean, I wouldn't, if you have horses, I wouldn't run them through a prairie dog colony. That's just asking for trouble. But what really does happen is competition for grass. And that's really where the rub comes in. Is so when we've got good precipitation in the Great Plains, there's a lot of good grass. And usually the ranchers have enough grass for their cows and prairie dogs as well. It's when we're in drought years that all of a sudden prairie dogs need grass and so do cows, and there's not a lot left. And so that's where the real conflict comes in. And the Great Plains are just a roller coaster of precipitation from year to year sometimes. And we go through wet cycles and dry cycles. And so kind of along with politics and along with the wet and dry, that's how prairie dogs go. And so sometimes they get really hot as a controversial topic, and sometimes things kind of cool off when it's raining and there's lots of grass for everybody.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, has there been a legislative push whatsoever to subsidize habitat for prairie dogs in pasture land?
Yeah, great question. So there actually has been a pilot program that went through the Natural Resources Conservation Service to pay landowners for maintaining prairie dogs. They can still graze it. They just couldn't kill the prairie dogs on there. And we had a few landowners in Colorado take us up on that offer. Unfortunately, we couldn't get NRCS to really fully implement the program. They didn't want to sign people up for that program. They want to sign them up for CRP or other programs that they had going on. So the implementation of it was really difficult. And we'll see if that comes back around again. If we get a better round of funding under this administration, it's really up in the air. So we certainly need private lands to contribute to this. We need public lands in the form of federal lands, national parks, U.S. Forest Service lands, BLM lands, national wildlife refuges, and we also need Native American tribes. And there's lots of prairie dogs on some of the tribal lands out west as well. We've also got city lands here in Colorado, just north of my house here, that harbor black-footed ferrets and prairie dogs on city of Fort Collins lands. So we need to think about kind of the suite of different land types that land management types that we need to have contribute to recovery, and we need all of them. Yep.
No kidding. Well, thank you so much.
You bet. So if you want to lobby for it, please do.
I'll get right on that.
Thanks, Dan. That's awesome. If you need help, let me know. Awesome, guys. Any other questions for Travis?
Hey, Nate, do you mind if I chime in for a moment?
Oh, please, Dr. Hinkstrom, please.
I just want to say hey to Travis. It's great to see you again. Fantastic presentation. It was really cool to be taken on a tour from the molecular level all the way through to the landscape level perspectives on black-footed ferrets and prairie dogs. So that was really fun. And I wanted to share with the students, it's just my perspective on Travis, is that this is the guy, he's like the epitome of someone who took passion and turned it into a career and a lifestyle. You don't see this often, but you are one of those few, and it's remarkable what you've done with your career and your work that goes to contributing not just to black-footed ferrets and prairie dogs, but to an entire prairie ecosystem. So kudos on you, guy.
Thank you, Scott.
Travis, I have a question for you.
Yes, please.
So do you think that because your non-for-profit's focused on like field biology, do you think that kind of hinders you a little bit from because you're not associated with the lobbying and helping it with legislation? Do you think that kind of hinders you from being able to kind of advocate for the species, or are you just kind of using your work to kind of advocate?
Well, I think it comes back to probably what, really, I'm the only employee. So it's really me. What are my strengths? And I work with World Wildlife Fund and Defenders of Wildlife and National Wildlife Federation and all those bigger organizations that are so much better at lobbying for things and have people that are much more suited for this than me. I'm a stinky weasel chaser. That's what I'm good at. I am good at crawling around the prairie at night and finding black-footed ferrets. And so that's my strength that I bring to it. And being a nonprofit organization actually allows me, I think, the maximum flexibility. I work with feds, I work with states, I work with tribes, I work with NGOs, I work with everybody. And I try to work with people who bring different strengths. And I think that that's really important to think about in your career as a conservation biologist. And you look at the curriculum that you have to take at point, and it's pretty broad sometimes, or you can be pretty broad, but you can't be an expert in every field, but you can learn a little bit about all of it, understand how to tie it together. And then once you start working in the field, start finding those partners and people to work with that are experts in their field that are only going to enhance your work. And so that's the way I approach kind of the nonprofit thing and where I think my role is in black-footed ferret recovery. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
You bet.
I got another.
Oh, go ahead, Theodore.
No, you can go.
Okay. What drew you initially to black-footed ferrets? You said you went straight to working with them.
Yeah. It was absolutely entirely serendipity. It was not a planned thing. So to give you guys a little bit more of the detail of the path that I took. So my senior year at Point, I got an internship with the Wisconsin DNR working on the restoration of small prairies on the Mississippi River. So going up on the bluffs and literally cutting down trees to get sunlight down to these little goat prairies that used to exist along the bluffs on the western side of the state. And it was a neat little internship. When I graduated from Point then, I was able to get a job in Kentucky working for the State Nature Preserves Commission, doing a pretty similar thing, going to different nature preserves in Kentucky and trying to open up the canopy, doing some weed control, doing things like that, even some trail building, and trying to restore these small prairies. And while, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't what I envisioned my future to be. But I worked very hard at it. When I finished that job up, I put in my application for general technician positions, and this is back when you actually had to paper applications, and it went into a big pool of applicants for the North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa region. And it's for federal government technician positions. So it could have been ducks, could have been deer, could have been anything. And a couple months later, a guy calls me up and says, "Hey, do you want to come out to the Badlands and work on black-footed ferrets?" Holy cow. Yeah, I absolutely, it's a couple things. It's a job, it pays. It's mustelids, which is something I was totally interested in, and endangered species. And so I packed up everything I owned in my truck and drove west across the Mississippi River for the first time in my life to South Dakota for a 6-month temporary position. And as I started working with these black-footed ferrets and working in South Dakota, I really enjoyed it. And they asked me when my term was up, "Can you stay a little bit longer?" Sure, I can stay a little bit longer, a little bit longer, a little bit longer. That was 27 years ago now. And so it wasn't something that I necessarily picked out and chose, but it presented itself, and I couldn't imagine doing something different at this point in my career. When I asked that boss in South Dakota, "Why did you pick my name out of those stacks and stacks of technician applications?" And he said, "I was looking for 2 things, and you had 2 things." He said, "You had a degree in wildlife," and he said, "You had experience working on the prairie." Even though the prairies I worked on were the size of a classroom or maybe a couple acres bigger down in Kentucky, that I still had the word prairie on there. And that's what got me in the door. And so I guess the message here for you guys to think about is sometimes you can pick where you go, sometimes you can't pick where you can go. And sometimes it's okay that you can't pick where you go. And it's okay to go with something. Do it hard, do it well, and do a good job. As you guys all know, this is a very incestuous field of wildlife management, and somebody's going to know somebody that's going to help you along the way. And so work hard at what you do, no matter what it is that you're doing. Get your butt out there and get an internship, get a job, volunteer, do whatever you have to do, and do it to the best of your ability. That's the best way to get started in this field. So you might choose, you might know which way you want to go right now. That's great. I didn't really, and I was willing to follow the winds, and they took me to South Dakota. Somebody else had a question.
Yeah, I have another one actually about the clones and stuff.
Yeah.
So okay, it's kind of a 2-parter. So with Elizabeth Ann, I'm assuming she is just a for captive breeding, but are there plans to have other clones who are released in the wild, or are they just for captive breeding purposes?
That's a great question. And that's something that we're unfortunately kind of figuring out on the fly. She will remain in captivity for the rest of her life. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. And any other clones that come along in the near future probably will remain in captivity for the entire time. Their offspring may go out for release into the wild. How we do that and when we do that is something we're still talking about, discussing, trying to plan and understand what's the best way to have this genetic diversity that we've now increased just incrementally and bring that back out into the wild. And if we bring it out into the wild, is it going to survive? We don't even really know that. So for instance, with the population in South Dakota that I've been working on, that's a fully wild population. We haven't put a captive ferret out there for 20 years. What if we come take a descendant of one of these clone ferrets and put them out there? He might get outcompeted by the wild ferrets, and that new genetic diversity may not even make it into the population. So we definitely have to think about the mechanics of how this is going forward, as well as the ethics of how to do this well. So a lot of questions yet, but excellent question.
Thank you.
Great stuff, guys. Any other questions?
If you guys haven't seen it, if you go to our Facebook page, Prairie Wildlife Research, there's a article by Popular Science that just came out. Does a great job of talking about some of our challenges for black-footed ferret recovery. The news about Elizabeth Ann the clone is fantastic. It's great. The honest truth is this is not going to save the species. This is another little cog, another little puzzle piece that's part of the bigger puzzle for black-footed ferret recovery. The bottom line is habitat and managing plague. So genetic diversity is going to help a little bit, but habitat is really where it's at.